Before we start, tell us where you are watching from and what time it is in your city right now. Keep that time in your head. Now picture a dark room packed with wires, 100 tiny lights blinking like secrets, and women who can make two strangers breathe into the same silence with one plug of a cord. New York City, 1908. After midnight, the Broadway Exchange looks like a church with better gossip. 30 switchboards in 2 rows, headsets, jack fields, cord pairs that snap like little whips. A wall clock with a red second hand that never forgives. The day girls go home at 10. The night crew takes over at 11 because night calls pay extra and respectable people like to sin when offices are closed. The night floor boss is Mrs. Viola Dane. She runs the room by 2 rules. First, you never put your name where a number will do. Second, you do not sell anything you cannot deny in a crowded hallway. She keeps a ledger in a drawer that looks like a prayer book. It is not a prayer book. At 11:56, a new hire walks in for her first real shift. Her name is Nora Field. She is 22, quick with her hands, quiet with her face. She has the bad kind of memory for this work. She remembers everything, not only numbers, voices, the shape of a laugh, the way a man clears his throat when he lies. Viola sees it in 5 minutes and knows it could make them money or put them in front of a magistrate. She decides money first. Nora's station is position 15, second row, near the wall phone that rings when someone with a badge wants the floor boss. It is a good learning seat and a bad place to cry. Viola clips the headset to Nora's hair and says, "You keep your cord hands clean and your face blank. You do not play savior. You make connections." At midnight, the first run hits. Party lines across 3 tenements light like a string of matches. A grocer calls his brother to complain about sugar prices. A nurse calls a resident to warn that a wife is waiting in the street. A married man calls a boarding house on West 23rd and asks for a woman who registered under a false surname that has too many consonants. Nora plugs, rings, cuts. She learns the rhythm. Ring once for a gentleman with money and impatience. Ring twice for a woman who wants to sound surprised when the wrong house answers. Break in after 3 if you smell panic. Do not hover. Do not judge. Keep the city moving. At 12:30, a line crosses by accident or by plan. Line 31W from a hotel parlor picks up line 08S in a private club library. The 2 callers hear each other breathe. They say hello in the wrong tone, the kind of hello that starts trouble and ends trials. Nora looks up. Viola's hands are already on the keys. "Let it ride," Viola says. If they hang up in 5 seconds, it was a mistake. If they stay, it is work. They stay. A woman's voice with county school on the edges says, "I am alone. I should not be. Who is this?" A man with a flat Harvard A says, "I am no one. I should sleep. I do not." They do not give names. They trade the kind of sentences people practice in mirrors when they think they will never get to use them. Viola nods to Nora and lifts a finger. Mark the time, the exchange, the extensions. Nora writes in a tight hand. The ink looks like a ledger and feels like a sin. At 1, the room settles into the dirtier part of its shift. That is when the rescue calls happen. A lawyer calls to say he will be late to the reading room. An actor calls to ask a woman to leave a lamp in the window as a sign. A pastor's line lights and then goes dark twice because someone is deciding what to confess. Viola watches the wall clock and taps her pencil twice. 2 taps means one simple thing on this floor. This is a customer. She points Nora to a side jack labeled spare and leans in so close Nora can smell the violet water. You are going to make a correction, Viola says. You're going to cross 2 lines for 3 minutes and see if they like the mistake. If they do, you will sell them a chance to make the mistake again Thursday. If they do not, you will apologize as the exchange and blame a storm we did not have. Nora's hands shake for 1 second. Then they stop. She plugs line 12E into 17K and breathes with them until their voices find each other. The woman answers like a challenge. Who is this? The man answers like a question. Do you want me to be someone? Viola mouths a number. It is a figure that fits into a church envelope without a scandal. Nora says what she is told, and it sounds like mercy on a bad day. If you ever have trouble reconnecting, you can leave a donation at the exchange. We will help you avoid the public lines. They both say yes too fast. By 2, the notes in the drawer look like a city's mood board. A bank manager who calls an actress after every board meeting. A shop girl who calls a policeman's wife by mistake 3 times and does not mind the mistake by the 4th. A minister who takes calls on the parish line and asks if God can hear through cotton insulation. Nora learns the tell. If someone says the word dear to a person they should not be calling, the connection is worth a schedule. If someone says please and you can hear the glass on the table, the connection is worth a stenogram. Viola does not sell filth. She sells timing. She keeps a second book with nothing but days and hours. When a man makes a habit of calling a boarding house between 2 trains, she writes it. When a woman makes a habit of answering at the exact minute the housemaid goes to the scullery, she writes that too. After a week, she can sell a pattern to a lawyer or to a very particular wife who does not want a detective in her life but wants proof her husband is a fool. At 2:30, a test, a line labeled City Works, cuts in with an emergency tone. Someone claims to be a night engineer warning of an overload from the West Side Power Yard. Viola picks up and says her name without offering it. The voice on the line is wrong, not the wrong words, the wrong impatience. The real engineers talk like men who built the room. This one talks like a boy who thinks he owns it. Viola plays along. Do you want us to cut party lines to save load? She asks. We can clear non-essential. The voice says yes, like that is what he wanted to hear. Viola lowers the receiver and looks at Nora. Write that number down, she says. Someone wants to buy a city-wide excuse. There is a back room behind the switchboards with 2 chairs, a chipped sink, and a locked tin box. The girls call it the chapel. It is where the real trade happens. A man in a suit with small teeth waits there at 3 with his hat in his hands and a set of good cuffs. He is not a cop. He is not a reporter. He is something worse for this business. A lawyer's clerk with access to both. He wants schedules. He wants to know if a judge calls a certain woman after argument days. He wants to know if the judge's wife calls a certain reverend when her husband travels. He does not say why. He does not need to. Viola sells him the bare minimum and nothing in writing. He leaves with a number to call and a time to call it. Nora watches and understands that what they move in that tin box is not romance. It is leverage. At 3:30, the floor gets ugly, like it always does once a week. A jealous man with a department line calls a private residence 20 times in 5 minutes, and then calls the exchange to accuse the operators of encouraging immorality. Viola tells him lines cross at night because the city is busy. He demands names. She gives him numbers. He threatens to come down and read the books. She invites him to try. He asks for her supervisor. She tells him to bring a warrant and a doctor's letter that says he can stand smoke. He hangs up and calls the chief operator's office. Viola knows the chief will call back in an hour and ask for a report. She has one sentence ready for that, too. We corrected an overload and logged the complaint. Nora makes her first mistake at 4:10. She breaks in too early on a line to warn a woman that she might be overheard. She hears a gasp and a soft click, and nothing else. Viola does not shout. She walks over, taps Nora's wrist once, and says, "We do not save people from themselves. We sell them away to avoid being overheard next time." Nora nods and writes it on a scratch pad. Do not be kind on circuit. Be useful. At 4:30, Nora becomes useful in a way that surprises even Viola. She recognizes a voice on a line she has never handled. It is a politician who likes to sound like he is doing the city a favor by existing. He is using a hotel parlor phone marked reserved. He asks for a private number that belongs to a woman married to a man who sues railroads for a living. Nora hears a click that is not a connection. It is a human decision. She crosses his call into a deadline for 3 seconds, then reconnects him late, then notes the exact minute and the extension in the book. Viola watches the whole thing and does not stop her. After the call, she pulls Nora into the chapel and locks the door. "What did you hear besides him?" Viola asks. Nora closes her eyes and lists it like a clock. A bell captain waking a porter, a match, a glass, 2 men in the hall, a woman saying Thursday like it is a promise and a threat. He did not say her name. He said, "Meet." "And what did you do to him?" Viola asks. "I made him late," Nora says. Late is a story you can sell to both sides. He will think the city failed him. His wife will think the city protected her. Both will pay to be reassured. Viola considers the dumb luck of hiring a girl who thinks like a switchboard. She unlocks the tin box and takes out 3 items. A small notebook with numbers and no names. A stack of blank envelopes. A metal punch that stamps a tiny triangle into paper. She gives the punch to Nora. "When you mark a schedule worth money, use the triangle," she says. "When you mark a man who calls the wrong house from a public instrument, use 2. If anyone ever finds this book without the punch, it reads like a telephone log." At 5, the pastor finally calls back. He has a voice that makes broken people put their heads down even when there is no pew within 6 blocks. He tells the operator he needs the widow on 12th Street. She says the widow's line is busy. It is not busy. Viola watches Nora decide whether to lie for the priest. Nora decides on a different service. She crosses him into a party line where 2 women are talking about a funeral dress. He stays silent for 20 seconds and listens to what is left of their grief. When he finally speaks to the widow, his voice is less like a sermon and more like a hand. Viola marks a triangle in the book. Not for sale. For the city. The last hour before sunrise is when the floor decides whether a night was clean or expensive. Tonight is expensive. 2 new donors for the wrong line reconnection. 1 clerk who will call again with cash. 1 jealous department man who will come back with a badge. 1 politician who now thinks the exchange owes him an apology. And a new girl with a memory that will either make them rich or drag them into court. At 5:59, the wall phone rings with the tone no one likes. The chief operator. Viola lifts the receiver, listens, says yes in a voice that means she enjoys none of this. Hangs up. "Inspection," she says to the room. 8 o'clock. City Works claims we are bleeding load at night. They want to see our logs. Nora feels her stomach go cold. Viola does not. She unlocks the drawer, removes the prayer book ledger, and strips out every page with a triangle. She puts them in a second book with a different cover and a different story. The first book will survive an inspection. The second book will survive a raid. The tin box will survive a fire. The wall clock hits 6. The day girls start coming in with fresh collars and faces that still believe phones are for news and not for need. Viola puts a hand on Nora's shoulder and squeezes once. "Tonight you crossed 1 line on purpose and 3 by accident," she says. "We sell the second kind. By the end of the week, you will know the difference. By the end of the month, you will be able to do it with your eyes closed. Before that happens, we are going to give the city a show. If they want to look at our paperwork, we will give them an outage so tidy they will apologize for bothering us." "How?" Nora asks. "We practice a blackout," Viola says, "and we do it on their schedule, not ours." By noon, the exchange looks respectable again. By night, it turns into a market where breath is the currency and timing is the profit. Tonight, Viola Dane stops calling it training and starts calling it work. The rule she teaches first is simple. Crossed lines are not accidents. They are auditions. If 2 voices stay past 5 seconds, they are telling you they want the mistake to happen again with less fear. Your job is to sell them away to get what they already asked for and to make sure the city never admits it. Nora Field sits at position 15 with a pencil behind her ear and the triangle punch in her pocket. Viola slides a drawer open and shows her the kit like a pharmacist. Spare cords, blank envelopes for donations, a card with safe phrases for people who think they are whispering but are actually shouting. Do you wish to continue this conversation on a more private circuit? If you experience a crossed line, our office can route you through a secure extension for a modest maintenance fee. If a party line seems crowded, we can relieve load on Thursdays and Saturdays. At 10 past midnight, Nora runs her first full cross on purpose. She hears a steel mill foreman call a boarding house. The call is legal, dull, and headed to nothing. At that exact second, a pastor's private line clicks alive with a widow who always picks up on the second ring. Nora flicks the plugs, gives the faintest pause, and lets the foreman and the widow hear each other breathe. They both apologize. Then neither of them hangs up. He says he has not slept in 2 days. She says she sleeps too much. Nora waits until the apology turns into a rhythm. Then she becomes the polite ghost operators are trained to be. Exchange. We regret a crossed connection. If you wish to continue, we can keep this circuit clear for 5 minutes before the next load sweep. The widow asks how much a sweep costs. Nora quotes a number that fits in an envelope and a conscience. She logs the time and marks 1 triangle for a pattern sale later. Viola stands behind her without moving, eyes on the wall clock, mouth a straight line. When the 5 minutes finish, Nora clears the circuit and writes both extensions on a card with the word Thursdays. Viola nods once. "You did not sell filth," she says. "You sold an appointment. Appointments make calendars. Calendars make money." The room starts to tilt toward the wrong kind of busy. 3 boarding houses share a party line across 2 blocks. A private club library wants all 4 jacks kept open even when no one speaks. A department station phone clicks with a man who likes the sound of his own threats. The girls work the plugs like a piano, each note paired to a habit. If a husband says "dear" on a public line, flag it. If a wife calls a club and says, "Tell him the coal man is here at 1 in the morning," that is code for "get him home," and you will be tipped. If a gentleman asks for the same parlor phone and changes his voice the moment it connects, record it with a triangle and sell it to his lawyer next week. The city tries to look back. A reporter calls the exchange office number with a voice that wants to sound like a businessman. and fails. He says his name is Stone and asks vague questions about night courtesy practices. Viola puts him on hold by parking him on a dead trunk for 20 seconds. When she returns, she uses her own safe phrases. We do not discuss traffic. We provide connections. If you have a complaint, the chief operator will log it in the morning. He asks if the exchange ever accidentally joins lines for entertainment. Viola says the city is not a theater. He says he will call back with a badge. She tells him to bring a judge with him if he wants to sit in her room. He laughs too loudly and hangs up. Nora writes Stone on a card and keys the newsroom extension to memory anyway. At 1:30, they move from selling time to selling words. Viola brings out a slim book of scripts the girls wrote together after too many nights listening to rich people beg for lines they do not have. The scripts are not obscene. They are prompts. Ask him where he is. Ask her what time the maid sleeps. Ask him to hum the song from last Thursday. Ask her to describe the rain on her window even though it is dry. People think they want flesh. What they buy is choreography. Nora hates the book for half a second because it feels like cheating. Then she hears two people fumble and remember why the book exists. It is not to make sin. It is to keep disasters tidy. A man with a law office tone calls the chapel phone at 2 and asks for a schedule, not words. He wants to know exactly when a bank officer calls a woman on 9th Avenue and which nights the calls last more than 8 minutes. He is careful. He never says why. Viola names a price, halves it when he flinches, and doubles it again when he pretends not to have the cash ready. He agrees anyway. He asks for one more thing he is not supposed to ask for: a stenogram. Viola says no like a judge. We do not make paper of that kind, she says. We sell timing and silence. He accepts the boundary because what he really wants is not proof. It is leverage he can claim he never bought. The jealous department man pushes through at 2:15. He calls the same private residence 7 times, hangs up each time, and then calls the exchange to accuse the girls of running a vice theater with cords. Viola does not apologize. She says the city is heavy tonight, and perhaps he should go home. He says he will come down with a warrant. Viola tells him to bring uninterrupted current and a chair because inspections go badly on their feet. He threatens to end careers. Viola writes down his extension and underlines it twice. He will be useful later, she tells Nora. Nothing is louder than a man who thinks he is owed a clean night. Nora's hands stop shaking around 2:30. She starts to hear everything. The way a glove rubs a mouthpiece when a woman lies. The tiny tick in a line when 2 other jacks are about to crowd it. The 3 quick breaths a man takes before he says a name he should not remember. She uses it to prevent trouble and to create business. She clears a party line for a woman who wants to cry without audience. She crosses a club extension into a half-lit hotel parlor and gives 2 voices a place to meet in the dark without a detective seeing footsteps. She is not kind. She is precise. That is what Viola wanted. The City Works voice returns at 3 with a new story. Tonight it is an overload in the West Yard requiring immediate party line relief. Viola asks for the name of the foreman. The voice gives a name that belongs to a man who retired in spring. She takes down the number anyway and marks it twice, then plays along just enough to see what he is buying. We can relieve load on paper, she says. We will have to block certain circuits as maintenance. You will accept that if anyone complains. He says he can handle complaints. Viola hangs up and looks at Nora. He is buying a fog, she says. He wants a city-wide excuse stamped with a seal. If we give it to him, we own him. If we let him fake it without us, he owns us. The room gets its weekly punch of real danger at 3:15. A line crosses by itself in a way no one on the floor commanded. The club library bleeds into a family flat above a cobbler. A mother hears a man's low voice call a woman dear and thinks it is her husband. She screams, slams the receiver, and starts waking the building. Nora clears the lines fast, plugs into the mother's line alone, and says the one sentence that takes heat out of a kitchen. The exchange experienced an overload at the yard. We apologize. She repeats it twice until the mother's voice stops rising. Then Nora reaches into the drawer, pulls an envelope, and writes the family's number on it for a free month of priority correction. Viola watches her with a face that does not change and quietly removes one triangle from the book. Sometimes the city wants mercy more than money. The reporter returns at 3:30, this time on a private club extension that should not be calling the exchange office at all. A source says your girls sell timing, he says. Is that the word they use? Viola says the word is maintenance. And what happens when the lights go out, he presses. Who gets to keep talking? Viola gives him nothing except a smile he cannot print. Come back during business hours, she says. You will see the exact same thing. Women connecting men who are late. They practice making their own darkness at 4, not for mischief, but for control. Viola takes Nora into the battery room, where the knife switches line a wall like shiny teeth. She shows her how to drop a local bank, not the whole vault. 1 block, 4 jacks, 30 seconds. Enough to give the city a hiccup that sells explanations and erases a mishap. She shows her the fuse box on the auxiliary board and the clipboard with codes the inspectors think they invented. She points to a stamped note from City Works that says, Load relief authorized midnight to 4 on Saturdays. That, Viola says, is a license if you know how to read it. Nora asks the question she should not. What happens if an inspector catches us doing relief for a voice and not a neighborhood? Then we show him his own line got relief first, Viola says. Men who carry clipboards at night do not bring clean hands to the room. They bring habits. Put them on a quiet circuit and hand them a chair. They will sign whatever keeps them sitting. At 4:30, a husband uses the exchange to leave his wife without saying he is leaving. He calls a boarding house, books a room, asks for a private entrance, and tells the operator to thank his wife for 12 years he did not deserve. Nora plugs his 2 calls together by mistake, and the wife hears the booking. There is an ugly 10 seconds. The wife breathes like she is drowning on land. Nora does not break in because there is nothing to sell. She listens until silence. When the line goes dead, she writes in her book the sentence nobody ever records. She said, "Do not come back." By 5, Viola's drawer has the night's account. 2 new schedules sold for small, clean money. 3 donors who will pay to keep a private circuit on Thursdays. 1 politician who will need an apology that costs him. 1 reporter who thinks he has a story and actually has a rumor. 1 City Works voice buying a future storm. 1 family who gets a free month because the city made them bleed for no reason. The wall phone rings at 5:59 with the tone the floor knows. Inspection at 8 to review nighttime load and courtesy practices. Viola lifts 2 ledgers out of the drawer. The first is for men with badges. The second is for nights like this. She takes the triangle pages and moves them to the second book. She takes the empty envelopes with numbers on them and burns them in the sink. She hands Nora a wet cloth and tells her to wipe the sweat off the switchboard wood. "Inspectors hate shine," she says. "They like to see work." Nora folds her hands until they stop trembling. Then she asks, "What do we do if the inspector asks for the maintenance logs on a night we did not have a storm?" "We give him one," Viola says. "And if he wants to see a storm, we will give him that too, on his schedule." Chicago and New York share the same night if you own the wires. Tonight, the exchange will rehearse a blackout without burning a single fuse in public. Viola Dane calls it a safety drill to anyone who might repeat it. To the girls, she calls it what it is: proof we can erase our own footprints. The rehearsal needs 4 moving parts: a jealous man with a department line who will complain on cue, a city works voice that wants to buy a fog, a reporter who thinks he can catch the room looking guilty, and a clean way to blame the weather when there is no weather. Nora Field writes the list twice and underlines complain on cue because it is the only thing you cannot buy. You can only provoke it. At 11:50, Viola sends a single-page circular to the day supervisor that reads like a hymn to procedure. Midnight to 2, courtesy load relief on party circuits. 2 to 3, city test of auxiliary banks. 3 to 4, evaluation of inspectors' clipboard codes. The circular is a shield. If anyone asks later why the exchange was busy, they were busy following orders. At 12:08, the jealous department man dials the private residence he harasses every week. He does it 7 times in 5 minutes. He does it because he likes the sound of his own threats more than he likes anyone's company. Viola lets him ring, drop, ring. Then she connects him to the exchange office on purpose. He launches into the speech he practiced in a mirror. "Your girls are running a vice theater with cords. I hear men breathing on lines my men pay for." Viola keeps her voice cool. "Sir, we are under City Works instruction for midnight relief. If your station experiences crowding, we will prioritize emergency circuits." He says he will come down with a badge. She tells him to bring uninterrupted current. Inspections go badly on their feet. He slams the receiver. 10 seconds later, the City Works voice calls to say an overload requires relief exactly where that man lives. The timing is too neat. Viola smiles into the wire and says, "We have already begun." Nora handles the board like a pianist who finally knows the instrument. She clears a widow's line for 5 clean minutes to keep grief from turning feral. She pairs a steel foreman with a boarding house clerk and sells them a Thursday at 8 when both of their buildings go quiet. She shifts a politician's call into a useless trunk for 10 seconds so his apology to a woman lands late and weak. She is not being kind to anyone. She is shaping the city into something survivable. At 12:40, Viola takes Nora into the battery room. 2 dull red knife switches, 4 glass fuses the size of thumbs, a row of meters quivering like nervous dogs. "We do not take the city down," Viola says. "We give it a limp." She throws 1 auxiliary bank off for 20 seconds while Nora watches the main board. 3 party lines flicker, 1 club extension clicks dead, 2 private residences blink and return. It is nothing like a real outage. It reads like weather that could not make up its mind. Nora logs it to the second. The City Works voice returns with a new request at 1:10. "We need you to clear non-essential traffic on the West Yard for 30 minutes, he says. "We've got a surge on the River Line." Viola asks for a form number. He gives one that sounds true to a layman and false to someone who holds the clipboard that form lives on. She says yes anyway and marks his extension with 2 triangles. Nora understands. If they say no, he finds a way to make an outage they do not control. If they say yes, they can put their hand on the knob. Reporter Stone calls at 1:30 from a club library that does not like its members dialing the exchange. He is cheerful in the way men get when they think they found the secret door. A city work source says you're doing relief, he says. Funny night for the weather to cooperate. Any courtesy tonight? I should thank you for. Viola parks him on a dead trunk for 10 seconds so he hears his own breathing. When she returns, she gives him exactly one line. If you want to see us misbehave, bring a judge at 8, she says. Until then, stop wasting someone else's membership dues. He laughs, but he writes down 8. The jealous department man arrives at 2, not with a warrant, but with anger, which is cheaper and more dangerous. He pounds the lobby desk hard enough to make the ink tremble upstairs. The night porter calls up on the wall phone. Viola tells him to offer the man a chair and a form to complain on. Men who sit and write make smaller fires than men who stomp and shout. It buys them 20 minutes. At 2:20, Viola opens the chapel and lays out the kit for the rehearsal, like she is about to sew. Blank envelopes, triangle punch, 2 ledgers, one for the city and one for the room. A sheet of auxiliary codes the inspectors think they invented. She assigns roles. Nora runs timing. Ivy at position 9 runs lies. Ruth at position 2 runs apologies. Viola holds the knife switch. If the rehearsal works, they will be able to wipe a minute out of a courthouse file with a 30-second hiccup and a stamped note. The first test is domestic heat. Nora crosses a club library into a hotel parlor where a woman waits to be convinced she is not ridiculous. She lets them breathe, offers 5 minutes of courtesy relief, quotes a number that buys the next Thursday. Ivy monitors 2 party lines for a child's sneeze or a kettle's whistle. If either sound hits, she will cut the cross and slam in a maintenance tone that says, "This circuit is under inspection until 3:05. Ruth practices the apology the exchange uses when the city is the villain. We regret any confusion during last night's test of auxiliary banks. Your complaints are logged. Nobody believes it. Everyone accepts it. It is the tone, not the words. The second test is clergy. Viola picks the parish line of a priest who does not like her but calls anyway. She does not cross him. She drops his trunk for 10 seconds and brings it back. He hesitates, then calls the exchange to ask if God can hear through maintenance. Ruth says God prefers morning calls, but the exchange will carry anyone who is patient. He laughs and softens. Viola marks him 1 triangle, not for sale. The third test is press. Stone turns up in the lobby at 2:45 with a notebook and no permission. He tells the porter he is expected upstairs. The porter tells him the exchange is closed to visitors until 8. Stone tries to slip through behind an inspector who has come early to be a hero. It almost works. Nora feels her stomach drop when she sees 2 men's shadows in the stair-glass. Viola does not look surprised. She sends Ivy to the lobby phone with the sentence that makes men want to be decent. The night floor is full of girls, Ivy says. We ask gentlemen to wait for daylight. Stone hates that line because it makes him the villain of a story he cannot print. He paces in the lobby and pretends he can wait. At 3, CityWorks makes their play. The voice on the line, too smooth to have grease under his nails, says, "We're cutting the west yard for 10 minutes for safety. We need to see your logs at 8. Viola says, "We are already on relief." She pulls the auxiliary bank like a magician who knows what the rabbit will do. 2 blocks blink. A single club extension dies and pretends to be a candle. A boarding house line goes dumb and then sings. Nora watches the board and writes like a court reporter. 3 minutes. 5. 8. 10. She notes who panics, who prays, who kisses the mouthpiece. She notes which calls should now read as nothing in any file. The jealous department man cannot handle being denied drama. He forces the lobby door and takes 3 stairs before the porter grabs his sleeve. The girls hear boots on the landing. Viola raises her voice and says, "Now." Nora drops 2 party lines and gives them maintenance tones. Ivy kills the lobby phone so the porter can lie with a clean conscience. Ruth dials the City Works office, not the voice that has been calling, the desk that lives under it, and puts a real foreman on with the jealous man. The foreman speaks like iron and tells the man to sit down and stop making smoke. The man hates obeying a stranger and obeys anyway. He leaves a complaint with a shaky signature. That signature is worth money later. At 3:15, the rehearsal meets the line that scares Viola because it cannot be sold. A child coughs on a party line in a tenement that smells like cabbage and paraffin. The cough is bad, bad enough that even a room full of women paid to be useful flinches. Nora breaks every rule and clears the circuit without an apology. She puts the mother alone on the wire and says she will hold the line until the doctor answers. It is a selfish decision. It makes no money. It burns 30 seconds of their schedule. Viola lets it stand. She blows air out through her nose and throws the knife switch back up early. She will sell timing all her life. She will not sell a cough. Stone finally gets upstairs at 3:30 behind an inspector who wants to be thanked for his courage. He steps into the switchboard room and sees nothing printable. No naked sin. No ledger-marked triangles. A floor of women in headsets connecting men who are late. Viola hands the inspector the circular that says test, shows him the ledger that says routine, and points to the wall clock like a schoolteacher. The inspector asks a question from his clipboard. Viola answers with a code number he recognizes. He nods and decides he is done. Stone tries one last angle. "If I subpoena this room," he says, "what will I get?" Viola answers honestly. "A list of times," she says, "and a room full of women who make your calls go through." The inspector laughs. Stone does not. He leaves a promise to return with a badge and a judge and a look at Nora that says he noticed her hands stop shaking. At 4, the rehearsal ends because the city begins to wake up, and you cannot sell sleep to daylight. Viola locks the triangle book in the tin box and drops the key into her blouse, like a woman putting a cross back on after making a mistake. She counts heads and hands everyone a cup of water, like a nurse. Then she gives out orders that sound like a sermon and read like a threat to anyone who wants them to fail. "Ivy, you will run relief on paper for another hour for any man who writes a complaint with a signature. Ruth, you will log maintenance on the west yard as if a storm happened. Nora, you will go home, you will sleep, and you will come back at 10 tonight, ready to do it live. At 8 this morning, we will welcome our inspection. At 8:10, if they are still looking, we will give them the neatest blackout the city has ever seen without a storm in the sky." Nora stays after the others to put her hands on the wood of the board until she stops hating it for what it can do. Viola catches her at the door. "You heard the child," Viola says. "I cleared the line," Nora says. "You will keep doing that," Viola says, "but not if a man with a badge is watching. If he is watching, you will keep a club library alive, and you will carry a priest, and you will let a jealous fool burn his temper out on the office phone while the doctor finds the mother. We are not saints. We are a room that keeps the city from tearing itself to pieces for free. Nora nods. She understands the one part of the work that does not live in a ledger. The room decides who gets quiet in the night. Tonight it went to a cough. Tomorrow it will go to a call that should not exist. She is not proud of any of it. She is not ashamed either. She puts the triangle punch in her pocket and goes down the stairs into a city that will wake up wondering why last night felt like weather when there was no rain at all. Dawn makes cowards polite. By 8 in the morning, the inspector is back with a clipboard. The jealous department man is shaved and sorry, and Reporter Stone has a hat that says official without a badge to match. Viola Dane stacks 2 ledgers on the desk, moves the tin box to the chapel, and tells the day supervisor the room is hers until 8:05. At 8:06, the night shift takes the boards back like a volunteer fire brigade stepping past a parade. The plan is simple because anything harder leaves fingerprints. They will give the inspector a controlled limp, log it as auxiliary load relief, and bury last night's mistakes under a stamped note. They will do it while Stone watches from the doorway, and the jealous department man waits in the lobby to say something useful to anyone who looks important. Viola Dane assigns roles without looking like she is giving orders. Ivy runs the lie. Ruth runs the apology. Nora runs time. Viola's hand goes to the knife switch like a gambler palming a card she did not steal. The clock hits 8:10. The inspector clears his throat to ask his first question. Viola drops 1 auxiliary bank for 30 seconds. 3 party lines hiccup. A club library clicks dead. A boarding house goes quiet just long enough for a kettle to stop singing. Ruth dials City Works and reads the clipboard number they like to hear. Load relieved, West Yard, 8:10 to 8:11, she says. Ivy moves the jealous man's home line to the top of a list labeled maintenance, so he feels blessed, not ignored. Nora writes to the second, counts her breaths so the seconds do not feel like guilt. Stone leans in. Convenient weather, he says. Scheduled maintenance, Viola answers. Your club sent a notice. My club did not, he says. Then they saved postage, she says. The inspector marks a checkbox and pretends to be in charge. He asks Ruth to show him last night's courtesy logs. She hands him the clean book, the one without triangles. He scans names, sees none, and relaxes because a book without names is a book that cannot put him on a witness stand. Stone makes a face like he has eaten a lemon. He steps out to the lobby to agitate the jealous man into something useful. At 8:14, 2 things happen at once. City Works calls with a real emergency at the river line, and Stone returns with a smile he did not earn. The City Works voice, this time a man who sounds like he has touched a wrench, tells Ruth they are going to drop the riverbank for 15 minutes. He wants to make sure the exchange does not throw a second load in panic. Ruth says the exchange will keep its hands in its pockets. Viola hears what he does not say. Someone else will be throwing switches today. Stone does his part. He found a magistrate who likes being seen. He brings the man up the stairs like a captured flag. The magistrate looks at the boards, at the women, at the inspector with his box checked, and at Stone's notebook with its blank pages. He says he has questions about night courtesy practices. Viola sets the clean ledger on the desk as if it were communion and says, "We have a drill we can demonstrate. If your honor is willing to observe, you can write your own conclusion." Stone wants a scandal. She offers him a class. The jealous department man arrives, late and loud, shoving the porter into the hall so he can stand in the doorway and look important. "These girls run vice with cords," he announces to the magistrate. "They make men breathe at each other." The magistrate looks at him the way men look at flies. "You are not helpful," he says. The jealous man shrinks by half and tries to become furniture. Viola nods to Ivy and Ruth, and then to Nora. "Live," she says. This is how a blackout looks when the city is awake. Ivy steps to the lobby phone and calls the noble thing down the stairs where jealousy lives. "Sir, the city is performing a yard relief test," she says sweetly. "Your station may blink. Please sign the log so we can prioritize emergency response." Men who sign are men who do not shout. He signs. Ruth stands with the inspector and reads from the circular that says, "Test. 8:15 to 8:30, auxiliary bank evaluation," she says. "Non-essential circuits may be parked on maintenance." The inspector feels important because someone is quoting paper near him. He marks another box. Nora watches the board and sees it the way only people with the bad kind of memory see. Numbers become habits. Habits become heat. The parish line is quiet. The widow's line is quiet. The club library is already sulking. The politician's favorite parlor phone is about to ring. Stone leans closer, notebook ready to turn any tremble into a story. The riverbank drops at 8:17. It is not their switch. Lights over 2 blocks blink and come back weak. A girl in a tenement opens a window and screams because the kettle went dark while she held it. A man in a club library says a word. Men pretend they do not know. The boards flicker. Viola does not move. "Hold," she says. Nora holds. That is when the sabotage shows its face. A private extension marked City Yard 4B lights with a pattern that is not on any clipboard. It is the same voice that bought a fake storm. He is going to make it real. He wants to kill the exchange and write the report later. He wants to say the girls panicked and broke something important. Viola sees it because she is looking at him, not the meters. She lowers the receiver and says, "We will not cooperate with an unlogged test." He tries the old trick, the voice that explains the city to the city. "If you do not drop auxiliary banks, you will blow the yard." Viola looks at the inspector and the magistrate and the room full of women and says a sentence that ruins men or saves them. "Then you should take your hands off my board." Nora hears a second voice at the edge of the line. Lower, slower, iron under the vowels. It is the real foreman. She crosses City Yard 4B to City Yard desk with one hand and drops the fake without announcing it. The foreman asks a question the clipboard men always fail. "Who authorized your code?" he says. The fake gives a number that belongs to a winter memo. The foreman swears and kills his trunk from his end. The lights steady. The room breathes. Stone saw half of that. It is enough. He scribbles something he thinks is the sentence that will buy him a page. The magistrate saw the other half. It is not. He adjusts his hat and decides he will write that the exchange behaved like a church choir in a fire drill. Neither man is wrong. Neither man has the whole picture. The jealous department man tries to salvage his tantrum. He declares he heard girls sell private circuits. Viola orders the porter to bring the courtesy log and to point to the printed circular. The man reads aloud without understanding and shrinks a little more. The magistrate nods again and calls the inspection complete. Stone makes one last play. "Subpoena the second ledger," he says, too loud. Viola answers, calm. "There is no second ledger," she says truthfully. It is in the tin box. She does not call that a ledger. In this room, names matter. They almost make it out with a win. Then the stupid thing happens that ruins more reputations than sin. A husband calls a boarding house parlor, while his wife, late for church, calls the exchange to ask if her line will be clear at noon. The husband says the other woman's name. The wife hears it through a maintenance tone, "Ivy parked on the wrong jack by half an inch." It is nothing. It is everything. She says his name like she is pulling up a body from a river. The magistrate hears it. Stone hears it. The inspector hears it. The room stops breathing. Nora moves. She pulls the wife alone onto a clean circuit and says the sentence that saved them last night and will not save them today. The exchange regrets any confusion during auxiliary testing. The wife says, "I heard him." Nora says nothing because there is nothing to sell and nothing to hide. Viola makes a decision that turns a rehearsal into a war. She drops the knife switch not for 30 seconds, but for 90. The city limps. The club library dies. The boarding house goes dumb. The wife speaks into a silence that makes her question herself. It is ugly. It is the only way to keep a hallway from turning into a courtroom at 8:20. Stone is not a monster. He closes his notebook because he knows a single woman's life should not pay for his page. The magistrate pretends the moment did not happen. The inspector pretends the switch was scheduled. The jealous department man decides to save his voice for his own dinner table. Ruth logs the outage as auxiliary relief due to riverbank drop. Ivy rewires the jack and shoves her fist into her apron pocket until she can feel her own bones. When the lights steady, the magistrate shakes Viola's hand and says, "You run a tight floor." It is the closest the room will ever get to protection. Stone lingers. He asks Nora, not Viola, one question. "Do you like it?" he says, making the city breathe when it should choke. Nora says the only honest thing she has. "I like when the doctor reaches the cough," she says. "I do not like the rest." The inspection ends. The magistrate leaves. The inspector leaves with boxes checked. Stone leaves with a story he cannot sell. The jealous department man leaves with a signature in a log that will buy him silence next time he needs his home line fixed before his neighbors. The room exhales and the day girls replace the headsets. By nightfall, the city has decided what happened. The riverbank flickered. The exchange performed relief. 2 party lines complained. A judge observed order in a respectable office. The paper runs 3 inches on page 6 about maintenance. No names, no sin, no ledger. A week later, the district office issues a rule that no woman will work a night switchboard without a male supervisor present. It reads like protection. It acts like punishment. Viola moves to evenings and learns to sleep like a watchman with his boots on. Ivy transfers to a day shift where men complain about telegram charges and no one calls her a theater. Ruth gets married to a man who thinks she worked in clerical. Nora has a choice and hates both halves. She can take nights with a man at her back who does not understand the work, or she can leave a room where she kept the city from confessing to itself for money and for free. She takes a third option. She becomes the person on a different floor who teaches girls how to listen without bringing the city into the room when they go home. Stone prints nothing that week. Instead, he sends Viola a note without a name saying there is a magistrate who owes her a favor and a foreman who wants to buy her a drink and explain why he hates clipboard men. Viola burns the note and keeps the ashes in the tin box. Some nights you sell timing. Some nights timing sells you. City Yard 4B stops calling. A different voice calls from a different code and never tries to buy a storm again. The jealous department man goes back to being jealous and useful. The widow on the parish line gets 5 clean minutes every Thursday until she stops answering. The politician learns to apologize before he dials. The wife who heard a name learns an uglier truth. You can love a person and not trust a wire. She moves to a house with a bell and no telephone. She sleeps some nights. Some nights she does not. Viola keeps the triangle book under a different name. It is not a ledger. It is a way to remember who called when the city wanted to forget. She puts the triangle punch in the bottom of a drawer where the inspector will never look and the magistrate will never ask. She keeps one rule that is not written anywhere. If a child coughs, you clear the line. Everyone else can wait. Nora walks home after her last night on the floor and hears the city from outside for the first time in a year. Without headsets, it is quieter and meaner. She passes a window where a man screams into a dead receiver and thinks he is alone. She passes a door where a woman waits for the telephone that was never installed. She passes a church where the bell rings on time, whether anyone is listening or not. She thinks about breathing and chords and the neat lie of calling an outage weather when everybody knows the sky was clear. The Broadway Exchange looks like a church with better gossip in the morning again. The day girls sit down, collars fresh, faces calm, and make connections. The night floor is empty. The tin box is shut. The city will not remember what it almost saw at 8:17 unless someone makes it remember. No one in this room will. That is the work.